So good afternoon, everyone. Today we have Commissioner Hester Peirce. She's an American lawyer and current commissioner of the SEC, appointed by President Donald Trump in 2018. The commissioner is well known among the cryptocurrency community due to her strong leadership and past vocal expressions in favor of the SEC embracing the innovative idea of Bitcoin ETFs. Thank you, Commissioner, for being with us this afternoon.
Jouell, I'm so thrilled to be here with you. Thank you for having me. And I'm going to just start by giving my little disclaimer, which is that the views that I represent are my own views and not necessarily those of the Securities and Exchange Commission or my fellow commissioners.
Great. All right. So our first question, we're going to jump on in. Can you share your background, where you grew up, your career, and how you got into the financial markets?
Sure. I am an Ohio girl. I grew up just outside of Cleveland and went to school there for undergrad, and then found my way by way of spending a year in Europe, and then I came back and I went to law school and ended up in securities law. Securities was actually something that was always interesting to me. I had studied economics as an undergrad, and that really changed the way I looked at the whole world. It was really eye-opening to think about how markets work and how people's incentives work. And so securities law was a really nice way to put together my love of economics and my love of the law.
Right.
And so then ended up at a firm that did a lot of securities work and ultimately went over to the SEC for about 8 years. And then I was on the Hill for a while during the financial crisis, which you probably don't even remember, but
Heard about it.
It was a pretty dramatic time to be working on Capitol Hill. And so that was a real learning experience. And then went to a university research center where I wrote about financial regulation, and that was actually where I first started to hear about Bitcoin and crypto, and so that was an interesting thing to learn about. And then ultimately I got the chance to come back to the SEC as a commissioner.
It's a great path you took. I'm glad that you ended up in the space. And next question is, you've shown super courage standing up for your beliefs in this, on what you believe in crypto and how you're pro innovative ideas. And for what led you to realize Bitcoin and digital currencies needed to be considered by SEC and included in the future of the regulations?
Well, it was helpful for me that I had had a little bit of exposure to it before coming to the SEC, so I was somewhat familiar with the issues in that space. And then when I got to the SEC, I realized this was actually quite a big topic of concern at the agency, because a lot of people were coming and trying to understand how do the securities laws interact with this new cryptocurrency. And then Bitcoin really came to the forefront of our attention when some people came in and said, hey, we want to start an exchange traded product that is based on Bitcoin. And at that point, you know, I thought that that was pretty interesting, and I enjoyed looking at what these products were going to be, you know, how they were going to be built, what they were going to look like. And my colleagues had a different view of Bitcoin than I did. And so ultimately the product did not get approved, but I was able to, at that point, write a dissent. And, you know, part of the reason that I've been outspoken is because there is a lot of really exciting innovation happening in this space. And I think Bitcoin, you know, I don't advocate any particular product or asset class, but I think Bitcoin has been a place where a lot of people have put a lot of time and attention, and it's really amazing to see how much growth there's been in the last you know, in the last decade. And so I just think that the markets are maturing. We need to grapple with the fact that people want to have access to new kinds of assets. They want exposure in their portfolios to new kinds of assets, and we can't ignore that.
Right, definitely. And we're seeing like PayPal's just incorporated, you can purchase Bitcoin. We have Cash App and all of those things. So we're heading mainstream. So that's really great. You're doing these great things for us. So this week, as I mentioned, we saw the SEC amend its fundraising limits to help crypto companies raise capital. So are there any new regulations set to take place next year to ensure SEC gets on board even more with the currencies or the DeFi space and increase opportunities for innovative companies to scale?
Well, so you are right that this week we took a pretty big step, and it wasn't related specifically to crypto, although some crypto companies to do token distribution events have actually used Regulation A, which is it's a way for you to raise capital. That's not a full public offering. It's sort of like a mini IPO, some people call it. So it's a way of doing capital raising. And one of the things we did this week was we increased the amount of money that you can raise under Reg A. And we made some other changes to make other exemptions. So typically in the US, when you sell a security, you have to register it with us.
Right.
But there are also some exemptions from registration. And so we made a number of other changes relating to exemptions, such as crowdfunding. And so I'm hoping that those will be helpful just in general in helping our small businesses come out of COVID. And I suspect that some of these will be able to be used by folks in the crypto space. More generally, though, I think we really need to come up with a framework that is really more tailored for crypto, and I hope that's something that will happen. The DeFi space is a very interesting space, and I think for someone like me who's a lawyer, it's really fascinating to think about all the different aspects of our legal system that are kind of challenged by DeFi. And I don't say that in a negative way, but will challenge the way that we as lawyers have thought about certain legal structures, and we'll have to decide how we're going to grapple with that. So for example, the goal of DeFi is to take intermediaries out of the picture. Right. And so for us as securities regulators, we're always used to dealing with that's who we regulate, is the intermediaries. So when the intermediaries are gone, who do we regulate? How do we regulate? And so those will be fun questions for us to think about.
Right. So you're starting to think about it and pushing those goals. So we see in China, their piloted digital yuan has recently hit 300 million in transactions. Bitcoin is charting its own path versus global macro assets. We're at $15,000 for one Bitcoin today. Do you see the US and SEC becoming more interested in working with companies in the space to ensure regulatory compliance is met, to continue innovation, or will we see more regulations to protect consumers?
Well, I think one of the complications in the United States is that we have so many different regulators who have a potential touch on digital assets or crypto. And so part of what we need to do is coordinate better and work together better. They're always, for the SEC specifically, we have a three-part mission, and one of the pieces is investor protection, another piece is capital formation, and another piece is maintaining the integrity of the marketplace. So we're always going to be trying to balance those things. But I think the point that you bring up is a really good point, in the sense that we're seeing other countries really move forward with a much more purposeful approach. And, you know, there are other countries like Switzerland has taken a really forward-thinking approach. Or here in the United States, you have a state like Wyoming that said, you know what, we realize that there's something here and we're going to build a framework for it. Right. And so I'm hoping that some of those regulators and some of those jurisdictions will be models for us at the SEC and in the federal government.
Right. Great point. Shout out to the Wyoming Blockchain Coalition. Mr. David Pope and Caitlin Long are doing great work. All right. So this past October, the U.S. Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell spoke at the IMF annual meeting, and he stated that there may be a CBDC, which is a central bank of digital currencies, in the U.S. in the future, which is really exciting. So ETF proposals have also been denied by the SEC since 2015. Is the SEC planning on building a new architecture around digital currencies soon so we can ensure to stay on the race of progress?
So there's a lot there in that question. On the CBDC question, that is a little bit outside of our purview, but I will say that I think a lot of the really exciting work is not happening on the central bank digital currency side, but on the private crypto side. And so I think there's interesting work to be done on the CBDC side. And former crypto dad, former chairman of the CFTC, Chris Giancarlo, is doing a lot of work on that, thinking about how do you make sure that you protect privacy if you do some sort of central bank digital currency. But for our part at the SEC, we've not been so far building a new framework. Instead, what we've been saying is we have great rules, and they've been in place for quite a long time now, since the 1930s.
Right.
And they're intended to be very fluid and so that they can incorporate changes as they happen in the markets, and so that you don't have to keep rewriting them over and over and over. But I do think that there's something unique about crypto and about token distribution events that doesn't really gel very well with our existing regulatory framework. And that's why I've proposed a safe harbor framework. I'm not wedded to the framework I propose, but I am wedded to us providing some more clarity, because we get constant calls for clarity.
Right.
And not only around token distribution events, but also how can registered investment advisors deal with crypto? What about broker dealers? How do they deal with crypto? Exchanges want to know, can I list this thing to trade, or are you going to come in and tell me it's a security? So there are a lot of questions we have to answer.
Right. Still some good footwork to do, but the ball's rolling. Great. Okay, so last year there were articles in the crypto community which released statements that the SEC was seeking contractors to run Bitcoin and Ethereum nodes. What is the status of this, and is that an actual thing going on?
Well, so I should clarify that we have a FinHub, which is essentially our group of people at the SEC who are focused not only on crypto, but on fintech more broadly. And the SEC tends to be an agency that has lots and lots of lawyers. And lawyers, unlike you, I think, we don't have that technical background. We're not coders. And so one thing that we need to do more of, and it's not only in this space, it's across the board, we need to bring in people who have these other kinds of expertise. And I think that was what you saw reflected in some of the requests for trying to hire people who have that kind of a background. Even I often hire an intern, and I love to have interns who have some kind of background in crypto, or I typically hire a legal intern, right? But it's nice to have someone who has that kind of a background, because I can really use that kind of advice. So I think that's what it's just a function of us trying to get our arms around the technology, which is a really healthy thing for us to be doing.
Awesome. Okay, so what is a typical meeting like among yourself and the other commissioners in regards to the crypto and digital currency space? Are the other commissioners seeking the adoption and realizing this is something that we need to start working on and understanding, similar to you have?
Well, so the interesting thing about an agency like ours, where there are 5 commissioners, is that we have this rule called the Sunshine Act, which means that we can't all be in the same room together unless it's an open meeting, meaning it's public, or we're considering an enforcement action, in which case we can go in a closed room together and we can talk about these things. But we can have one-on-one conversations. And there is interest in grappling with this technology, thinking about the best way to regulate it. So even though I haven't succeeded yet in convincing my colleagues to go along with the safe harbor proposal that I made, I really do think that we're going to make progress, because I think people are realizing that lots of people, even people in the more traditional legacy financial institutions that we're more used to dealing with, are saying to us, hey, we have clients who are really interested in this stuff, so you need to work with us so that we can serve our clients the way we need to serve them.
Right. Okay. So the talk is happening. All right. So can you elaborate on the recently amended definition of accredited investor? What new qualifications were made to this option accessible to mom and pop retail investors?
Well, so I think that there are a couple things going on here. The most important thing is that we moved away from our previous approach to accredited investors. And the previous approach was us saying, you can participate in our private markets. So I mentioned we have our public markets and our private markets. Mm-hmm. You can participate in our private markets only if you're wealthy, if you have a high income or you have a high net worth. Now, what we did recently is we broke out of that mold and we said, you know what, we think there are other people who also ought to be able to participate. And so we opened the door only a little bit. So the people who can now participate are people, basically financial professionals who have passed certain tests or who work at a financial firm. But what we also did is we said, you know what, we're thinking about accredited investors differently now than we used to. And we're thinking about them more holistically. So if other people have ideas of what makes someone sophisticated enough to invest in these private offerings, come in, talk to us, and maybe we'll come up with some other categories of people that qualify as accredited. So while this may not sound like a big deal, it really is quite a big departure from where we were before, which is only looking at how much money you had or how much money you made. And now we're saying, you know what, maybe there are other characteristics that make you sophisticated enough to participate. But I will always give the caveat that, in my view, people ought to be able to spend their money the way they want. And so it's, I'm always trying to push for us to respect people's liberty and people's ability to make their own decisions for themselves. Of course, with that comes a lot of responsibility.
Right. I love that. That's very progressive, and I think it's amazing what you're doing. So we're wrapping up, and I have a few questions from the audience, some people I have asked on my social media. One of them's from Rhett Creighton. Would Ethereum be considered a security?
I love the question because it's just a very direct question, and it's one that I get asked a lot. Again, I don't opine on whether any particular thing is a security. I think that's an important thing to know about the SEC. We don't give opinions about particular things, whether or not it fits within the security bucket, until if we think that it does and you didn't offer it the right way, we might bring an enforcement action. So it can be difficult for people to figure out. I will note, however, that you can look at a speech that the director of our division of corporation finance, Bill Hinman, gave, in which he addressed Ethereum, and you might look there for some thoughts on how he thinks about Ethereum. Awesome.
And one more from Mo Remen. Any updates on that safe harbor proposal that you have discussed?
Well, so I've gotten a lot of great feedback. 2020 has been kind of a crazy year, as we all know. And so I haven't come up with version 2.0 yet, but I am working on version 2.0. And welcome input on the safe harbor, welcome thoughts about alternatives to the safe harbor, though I think that we got the core of this right. I think there's real space for the safe harbor. I think it would help a lot of projects that are right now just really uncertain about how to move forward. Is it the only thing we need to do in this space? Absolutely not. I think there's more that we need to do, but I think it would be a really positive contribution. So it's really more a question of just kind of tweaking the safe harbor.
Awesome. So thank you so much, Commissioner. If you have anything to say or any new updated news about some cool stuff in this space you'd like to share, please feel free.
Well, I don't know that I have any late breaking news, but I just will say that this has been a lot of fun, and I hope that people will know that they can reach out to me. I love to hear from people. I'm not always very prompt in getting back to people, but I do really urge you to contact me. And if there are things you think I should be thinking about, if there are questions that you have, don't hesitate to reach out. And I think that's how we can really make progress in this space.
Thank you, Crypto Mom.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you as well. All right, let's stop.